I'm James Kaelan, the founding editor of Bright Ideas magazine. We're based out of Los Angeles, published by the crowdfunding and distribution platform Seed and Spark, and this is my first time in Montreal, and therefore my first time at the Festival de Nouveau Cinéma. I'm very excited to finally be here. So since print started to die down in around 2008 with the availability of content online, the old model of print evaporated. There are obviously still many hangers-on, including great magazines like The New Yorker, but print is the future of print has nothing to do with the dissemination of immediate information. It has to do with a tactile and emotional visual experience. So there's actually been a major resurgence over the last half decade of big, oversized, high design print magazines that are visually driven. How does Bright Ideas as a press outlet fit into our crowdfunding and distribution platforms? I mean, we think of it as an ecosystem, because it is an ecosystem, and we take a holistic approach. So, and the power, the thing that makes an artist truly independent these days is direct access to audience. To use a term of art of late, the disintermediation of the film industry, taking out the middleman. If you can go directly, if you don't have to convince an investor that there's going to be a return and you can raise the money to make the film directly from your audience, and then use your audience to help, first watch the film and then promote it, that establishes real and sustainable independence. And what we use Bright Ideas to do is to promote both the ethos and then in the long run the filmmakers that we want to see who are taking this approach, who are making truly independent films on their own terms. And like Lily Amirpour, Anna Lily Amirpour, who's on the cover of our second issue, it was a crowdfunded film, premiered at Sundance. It's a black and white, right, it's here of course, right, but it's a black and white Western in Farsi, and we can't think of a less commercial film on the surface of it, and yet it's about to turn into a huge independent hit because of, in part because of Lily, and because she doesn't have to edit herself, and she can be this wild woman and go out and say crazy things and just be herself. But we make a magazine that we don't use the cover subject to sell the magazine. We use the magazine to sell the cover subject. We have the opportunity to put avant-garde filmmakers who are doing really bold new things, but who people aren't familiar with and whose faces certainly aren't, recognizable, even to people at the festivals, and then talk about them in in depth, but also in a way that doesn't. I've been thinking a lot about the pathologizing of challenging cinema, which has obviously happened since the new Hollywood sort of petered out in the early 80s. And it resurged in the 90s, definitely, but it's petered out again, and crowdfunding is allowing it to rear its head again. But audiences are way, as the fever over the renewal of Twin Peaks, reminded everyone last week. Audiences, maybe not the broadest audience, but enormous audiences are really into weird stuff, challenging stuff. If they're given the opportunity to watch it, obviously the studios are terrified of things that they can't predict. So art and the studio mentality, especially in this conglomerate world, they are not in communication. They cannot. They're mutually exclusive. But with this new access to audience, that crowdfunding and obviously what we call free-range distribution, where filmmakers retain the rights to their work, and using festivals that are doing really bold stuff. And this is one of the things that drives me crazy. I always use the example of, it's here this year. You guys are doing a Shirvani retrospective, who I think is one of the craziest filmmakers around. So I saw Fat Shaker at Sundance 2013, right? And I also saw what other weird films did I see that year? Charlie Victor Romeo. Packed houses, right? Here's a festival that has turned out hundreds of people to see these films that are not like anything else out in the world, and then they leave the festival circuit and people talk about them as if they have no capacity to attract audience, which drives me nuts. Give it context and tell people that they should try and watch these things, and they challenge themselves to, discuss new narratives, new forms. So that is, if there's a major thing that Bright Ideas is working to do, it is to, we don't present, obviously we cover only independent film, but we don't talk about it like we covered independent film. We don't talk about it like we're covering weird stuff. We just cover what we think is cool. A magazine like Bright Ideas has the duty to its filmmakers and to its audience to challenge those filmmakers to keep upping the game. And we will support them. The further out they go, the more we'll support them, because the one thing we know for sure is that attempting to, on a lower budget, replicate what Hollywood filmmakers are doing with whether that's pat narrative or, horror or, the conventional films that turn out, repeatable audiences, that stuff is, that's not the future of independent film. We have to be able, now that we have this new ability to connect with audiences, raise the funds we need to make the weird stuff we need to make, we have to. It's our duty to really challenge ourselves formally and aesthetically, because I always use the hip hop example. We published an article called the subtitle is "What Hip Hop Could Learn," or "What Hip Hop Can Teach Joe Swanberg." And Joe Swanberg's actually learned a lot from the hip hop, like the crew model, the Wu-Tang model of getting a bunch of auteurs together to efficiently make work on their own terms. But hip hop is at the most commercially viable hip hop artists keep pushing the limits. They keep getting more and more experimental, and they keep learning from the people who are on the edge. And in film, what we say is that the corpus callosum has been severed. The big no longer has to learn from the small, and the small no longer has any aspiration to be big. So that is, we have to reattach those nerves, and that's one of our sort of macro ambitions.